Now before we get into this particular mess of galactic proportions, let me set the scene properly. Because if there's one thing I've learned in my 37 years of existing on this cosmic rock we call Earth, it's that context matters. Especially when that context involves ancient alien artifacts, questionable life choices, and the kind of bureaucratic nightmare that would make the DMV look like a well-oiled machine. The year was 2387, and humanity had been mucking about in space for the better part of 4 centuries now. You'd think we'd have learned some manners by then, but no. We were still the same species that once thought it was a brilliant idea to build cities on fault lines and elect reality TV stars to public office. Some things never change. Dr. Elena Vasquez was elbow-deep in what the archaeological community generously called the find of the millennium. Though between you and me, they'd been saying that about every other dig site for the past 50 years. It was getting a bit old, like a broken record player stuck on absolutely revolutionary discovery. But this time, and I know what you're thinking, this time it's different, right? This time it actually was different. The artifact in question was a crystalline dodecahedron about the size of a basketball, covered in symbols that made ancient Sumerian look like a children's picture book. It had been sitting in the ruins of what used to be a thriving alien metropolis on Kepler 442b, probably wondering when someone interesting would show up. That someone turned out to be Elena, which says something about the universe's sense of humor. "Careful with that thing," muttered her research partner, Dr. Alex Petrov, as Elena delicately brushed centuries of space dust from the artifact's surface. Alex was the kind of guy who wore his anxiety like a comfortable sweater. Always present, never quite warm enough, and somehow endearing in its predictability. "Relax, Alex," Elena replied, not looking up from her work. "What's the worst that could happen? It's been sitting here for who knows how long. I doubt it's going to suddenly—" The crystal pulsed. Now, in retrospect, this was the exact moment when any sensible person would have stepped back, called for backup, and maybe invested in some heavy-duty protective equipment. But Elena was a xenoarchaeologist, which meant she possessed the unique combination of scientific curiosity and complete disregard for personal safety that had driven humanity to poke at every dangerous thing it encountered since the dawn of time. The pulsing grew stronger, and the symbols began to glow with an eerie blue light that reminded Alex uncomfortably of the time he'd accidentally consumed expired milk and spent 3 days questioning his life choices. "Elena," he said, his voice climbing an octave. "Maybe we should—" "Should what?" she snapped, clearly in the zone now. "This is active alien technology, Alex. Do you have any idea how significant this is? We're about to make first contact with an advanced civilization's database. Or blow ourselves up," Alex muttered. But he was talking to the wind at this point. Elena had that look in her eyes, the same look she'd had when she decided to pursue a PhD in xenoarchaeology, despite everyone telling her it was a field with no actual aliens to study. "Shows what they knew." The crystal lifted gently from its resting place, floating in the air like it was suspended by invisible strings operated by a particularly pretentious street performer. Holographic displays materialized around it, showing star charts, mathematical equations, and what looked suspiciously like the galaxy's most elaborate user manual. Then it spoke. "Scanning local entities," the artifact announced in a voice that sounded like it had been processed through a cosmic echo chamber, and maybe given a light existential crisis. "Genetic markers identified. Species, Homo sapiens. Origin, Sol 3. Status, confirmed." Elena's jaw dropped so hard it practically filed a complaint with her neck muscles. Alex made a sound that wasn't quite a scream, but wasn't quite not a scream either. The sort of vocalization that evolution had specifically designed for moments when ancient alien technology started talking back. "Accessing historical records," the voice continued, apparently unperturbed by their human brand theatrics. "Cross-referencing with founder database match found." A pause. In that pause, you could practically hear the universe holding its breath, which is impressive considering the universe doesn't technically have lungs. "Welcome back, founder." Elena blinked. Alex blinked. Even the crystalline artifact seemed to blink, though that might have just been the lights flickering. "I'm sorry, what now?" Elena finally managed to croak out. "Founder protocol activated," the artifact replied cheerfully, as if it had just offered her a mint instead of turning her entire understanding of human history into cosmic confetti. "Initiating administrative access to Galactic Confederation archives." The holographic displays around them exploded into a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, complete with trade routes, political boundaries, and what appeared to be the interstellar equivalent of a customer service department. It was frankly a lot to take in before lunch. "Hold on just one damn minute," Elena said, finding her voice again. She had the tone of someone who had just discovered that their quiet suburban neighbor had been running an underground fight club for sentient houseplants. "What do you mean, founder?" Founder of what? The Galactic Confederation. The artifact responded with the patience of a cosmic kindergarten teacher. Established 900,000 standard years ago by the species designation, Homo sapiens. Administrative codes embedded in genetic structure of all human organisms. Alex sat down heavily on a nearby rock, looking like he'd been hit by a metaphysical truck driven by a philosophy major on a bad day. Elena, he said quietly, are you understanding what this thing is telling us? It's telling us that humans founded some kind of galactic government almost 1,000,000 years ago, Elena replied, her voice hollow. Which is impossible because we were barely figuring out fire back then. Correction, the artifact interjected helpfully. Primitive human populations remained on Sol 3. Advanced human civilizations established confederation approximately 900,000 years ago, following initial contact with precursor species who provided foundational technologies, then returned to homeworld for reasons classified under Founder Directive 7742 Alpha. The silence that followed this pronouncement was the kind of silence that archaeologists dream about. The moment when everything you thought you knew gets tossed out the window like yesterday's newspaper, and you realize you're standing at the threshold of something so monumentally significant that your brain starts making little whimpering sounds. So, Elena said slowly, you're telling me that humans, our humans, went to space, founded a galactic civilization, and then came back to play in the dirt? Essentially correct, the artifact confirmed. Though the actual reasons are considerably more complex and involve what your species would term philosophical differences with other Confederation members. What kind of philosophical differences? Alex asked, apparently having recovered enough of his composure to engage in what was possibly the most important conversation in human history. The holographic displays shifted, showing images that looked like a cross between a United Nations meeting and a cosmic circus. Dozens of alien species sat around what was clearly some kind of legislative chamber, and if Elena wasn't mistaken, the figure at the head of the table was distinctly human-shaped. Humans possessed certain unique characteristics, the artifact explained. Creativity, adaptability, and what other species termed aggressive problem-solving methodologies. Elena translated this in her head. We were too crazy and unpredictable for the other aliens to handle. Additional factors included human tendency to anthropomorphize inanimate objects, unusual bonding patterns with non-sapient species, and persistent habit of turning dangerous situations into competitive activities. So basically, Alex said, we were the weird kids in Galactic High School. That's actually not far off, Elena admitted. She turned back to the artifact. So what happened? Why did humans leave? The crystal pulsed thoughtfully. Federation Council expressed concerns about human destabilizing influence on established order. Humans responded by proposing series of reforms that Council deemed excessively revolutionary. What kind of reforms? Proposal to establish universal health care for all Confederation species. Mandatory vacation time for sentient beings. Prohibition of bureaucratic procedures requiring more than 17 forms. Establishment of what humans termed common sense as guiding principle for interstellar law. Elena couldn't help but smile. Even 900,000 years ago, humans were apparently trying to fix everything that was broken, and getting frustrated when nobody else wanted to go along with it. The other aliens didn't like these ideas? She asked. Council majority viewed human proposals as threats to established hierarchical structures. Debate period lasted approximately 47 standard years, during which human representatives became increasingly vocal in their criticisms of Council inefficiency. We told them they were idiots, Alex translated. In more colorful terminology, yes, the artifact agreed. Ultimately, human leadership decided to withdraw from active Confederation governance while maintaining founder status. Return to Sol 3 was intended as temporary measure pending development of more compatible government framework. Temporary? Elena laughed, but it wasn't entirely a happy sound. It's been almost 1,000,000 years. Human leadership left specific instructions regarding conditions for re-engagement with galactic community, the artifact explained. Activation of this codex by human genetic markers indicates readiness assessment period has begun. The holographic displays around them shifted again, showing what looked like a cosmic report card. Categories included things like technological development, social cohesion, environmental stewardship, and something ominously labeled likelihood of starting intergalactic incidents. Elena studied the readouts with growing amazement. These are actually not terrible scores, she said. I mean, we're not winning any awards, but we're not in the cosmic dunce cap category either. Human development has proceeded largely as predicted by founder projections, the artifact noted. Species has maintained characteristic resilience, adaptability, and tendency to find innovative solutions to complex problems. What about that last category? Alex asked, pointing to a metric labeled propensity for chaos generation. The bar was glowing an alarming shade of red. Some things never change, the artifact said, and Elena could swear she heard amusement in its voice. However, chaos generation is considered a valuable strategic asset in current galactic political climate. Current political climate? Elena asked. The displays shifted to show what looked like a map of galactic territories, but instead of the neat, orderly boundaries she'd expected, it looked more like someone had thrown a pizza at a wall and tried to claim the splatter patterns represented legitimate governmental boundaries. Confederation has experienced significant structural difficulties in absence of human administrative input, the artifact explained with what Elena was beginning to recognize as diplomatic understatement. Bureaucratic efficiency has declined to approximately 0.3% of founder-era levels. Interspecies conflicts have increased 4,700% over past 500,000 years. Overall governmental effectiveness rating, catastrophically inadequate. They've been running things into the ground without us, Elena said. Essentially, yes. Alex stood up and started pacing, which was his standard response to information that threatened to reorganize his entire worldview. Okay, so let me get this straight. Humans founded a galactic government almost 1 million years ago, left because everyone else was too stuck in their ways to accept our revolutionary ideas like healthcare and common sense, and now they want us back because they've made a complete mess of things. Accurate summary, the artifact confirmed. And this activation means what exactly? Initiation of Founder Return Protocol. Human species will be contacted by Confederation representatives to discuss resumption of administrative responsibilities. Elena felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature of the alien ruins. When you say contacted, Confederation diplomatic vessel will arrive at Sol 3 within 7 standard days. The silence that followed this announcement was pregnant with the kind of implications that would keep political scientists busy for the next few centuries. 7 days, Elena repeated slowly. 7 days before first official contact with an alien civilization. Technically, recontact, the artifact corrected. Though given apparent memory loss of founder history, distinction may be academic. Alex had gone very pale, which was impressive given that he was already the kind of person who looked like he spent most of his time indoors reading technical manuals. Elena, he said carefully, do you realize what this means? It means, Elena said, looking at the swirling galactic map surrounding them, that we're about to find out whether humanity has learned enough in the past 900,000 years to not screw up running the galaxy twice. Or, the artifact added helpfully, whether human chaos generation capabilities have improved sufficiently to solve current Confederation crisis through creative destruction of existing power structures. That's actually not reassuring, Alex said. Human history suggests species performs optimally under pressure, the artifact continued. Confederation analysis indicates 73.2% probability of successful crisis resolution through application of standard human problem-solving methodologies. What methodologies are those? Elena asked, though she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to know. Improvisation, stubbornness, refusal to acknowledge impossibility of success, and tendency to approach complex problems from completely unexpected directions. Elena and Alex looked at each other. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement of human capabilities, but it wasn't entirely wrong either. So what happens now? Elena asked. Now, the artifact said. You have 7 days to prepare your species for return to galactic governance. May I suggest starting with diplomatic protocols and working your way up to crisis management? Elena laughed, a sound that was equal parts hysteria and determination. 7 days to prepare humanity for galactic leadership. No pressure or anything. Pressure is optimal human operating condition, the artifact observed. Historical data indicates species performs most effectively when facing seemingly impossible deadlines. Great, Alex muttered. We're the galaxy's emergency IT department. The holographic displays began cycling through what appeared to be an extensive briefing package. Star charts, species profiles, economic reports, and something that looked ominously like a cosmic debt statement. Elena watched the data stream past and felt the familiar sensation of being in way over her head, but also the unmistakable thrill of standing at the edge of the unknown. "All right," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her own voice. "I guess we'd better call Earth and let them know they're about to be cosmically important again." "Communication protocols have been established," the artifact announced. "Direct quantum entanglement linked to Sol 3 governmental systems is now active." "Of course it is," Elena said. "Because why would any of this be simple?" The next few hours were, to put it mildly, interesting. Elena and Alex found themselves in the unique position of being the first humans in recorded history to file a report that began with, "So, funny story about that alien artifact we found," and ended with, "And that's why the President of Earth should probably clear her schedule for the next few decades." The response from Earth was about what you'd expect when you tell an entire planet that they're about to resume management of a galactic civilization they'd apparently founded and forgotten about. The initial reaction could be broadly categorized as confused screaming, followed by a period of bureaucratic panic, and finally settling into resigned determination to muddle through somehow. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself promoted from xenoarchaeologist to special advisor on cosmic affairs in record time, which she suspected was mostly because nobody else wanted the job. Alex was designated as her deputy, a position he accepted with the enthusiasm of a man being asked to juggle flaming chainsaws while riding a unicycle. The world's governments went into emergency session, which in practice meant a lot of very important people sitting around conference tables trying to figure out how to explain to their constituents that humanity was apparently due for a cosmic performance review. Meanwhile, the artifact, which Elena had taken to calling the Codex, because that crystalline thing that turned my life upside down, was too unwieldy for official reports, continued dispensing information with the relentless cheerfulness of a cosmic help desk. Confederation current status: 17 major rebellions, 43 minor insurrections, economy in freefall for past 12,000 years, and what your species would term bureaucratic gridlock, preventing resolution of any significant issues. "Sounds familiar," Elena muttered, thinking about Earth's own governmental challenges. Additionally, the Codex continued, recent emergence of species designated the Devourers has created existential threat to Confederation survival. Current military response efforts have been suboptimal. "How suboptimal?" Alex asked, though his expression suggested he was already regretting the question. "Confederation military has lost approximately 78% of engagements with Devourer forces. Current strategic doctrine involves filing formal complaints about Devourer violations of interstellar law." Elena rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming on that was approximately 900,000 years overdue. "Let me guess, the Devourers are not responsive to strongly worded letters?" "Devourers appear to interpret diplomatic communications as either irrelevant or delicious, possibly both. So the galaxy is being invaded by something called the Devourers. The galactic government is completely dysfunctional. The economy is in freefall, and everybody's expecting humans to show up and fix everything," Elena summarized. "Accurate assessment," the Codex confirmed, though everybody may be overstating Confederation enthusiasm for human return. Several member species have expressed reservations about resuming human leadership. "What kind of reservations?" The holographic displays showed what appeared to be a collection of diplomatic notes, most of which seemed to focus on terms like unorthodox methodology, concerning disregard for established precedent, and tendency to achieve impossible outcomes through application of pure audacity. "Essentially," the Codex explained, "Confederation members simultaneously require human intervention and fear human intervention. They want us to save them, but they're worried we might actually succeed," Alex translated. "Human success tends to involve significant changes to existing power structures," the Codex noted. "Current Confederation leadership is understandably reluctant to embrace such changes." Elena couldn't help but smile. Even across 900,000 years, the fundamental dynamics of politics remain depressingly consistent. "So we're dealing with a crisis that requires radical solutions, but the people in charge are more afraid of change than they are of extinction?" "Standard governmental operating procedure," the Codex agreed. "Wonderful," Elena said. "Just wonderful." The next few days passed in a blur of briefings, emergency meetings, and increasingly frantic preparation efforts. Earth's various governments had decided that humanity's best bet was to present a united front, which in practice meant that everyone agreed to let Elena speak for the species while they argued about who was actually in charge behind the scenes. Elena threw herself into studying the briefing materials the Codex provided, trying to compress 900,000 years of galactic history into something resembling a coherent understanding. What she found was both fascinating and depressing. According to the records, early human galactic civilization had been characterized by what the Codex diplomatically termed innovative approaches to traditional challenges. Reading between the lines, Elena gathered that humans had basically looked at established galactic norms and decided that most of them were unnecessarily complicated, inefficient, or just plain stupid. The Codex helpfully provided examples of human innovations, replacing the Confederation's 47-step legislative process with a simple majority vote system, instituting universal basic income for all sentient species, establishing the Department of Cutting through bureaucratic nonsense, creating fast-track immigration procedures that reduced processing time from 200 years to 6 months, implementing what humans called common-sense exemptions to regulations that contradicted basic logic. No wonder they kicked us out, Elena muttered, reading through the list of human reforms that had apparently terrified the Confederation establishment. We actually tried to make things work better. Human administrative efficiency ratings during Founder period, 4,847% above galactic average, the Codex noted proudly. Citizen satisfaction levels, highest in recorded Confederation history. And after we left, efficiency ratings declined steadily. Citizen satisfaction levels currently at 2.3% of Founder-era measurements. Elena shook her head. It was like discovering that your ancestors had been running a successful business, only to have the board of directors drive it into the ground the moment they took over. On the 5th day after the Codex activation, Elena was reviewing diplomatic protocols when Alex burst into her temporary office with the expression of someone who had just witnessed a cosmic traffic accident. "Elena," he said, breathing hard, "you need to see this. The Codex just picked up something on long-range sensors." They hurried back to the artifact, which was now surrounded by enough monitoring equipment to stock a small research station. The holographic displays showed a tactical overview of the local star system, with a new contact marked in ominous red. "Confederation diplomatic vessel Bureaucratic Necessity has entered Sol System," the Codex announced. "Estimated time to Sol 3 arrival, 18 standard hours." 2 days early, Elena said. "That's either very good news or very bad news." "Vessel is transmitting priority diplomatic codes," the Codex continued. "Message content, urgent consultation required. Situation deteriorated beyond acceptable parameters. Human intervention needed immediately." Elena and Alex looked at each other. In Alex's expression, Elena could see her own thoughts reflected. Whatever was happening in the galaxy had gotten bad enough that the Confederation was willing to swallow their pride and ask for human help earlier than planned. "Can we respond?" Elena asked. "Communication link established. However, protocol suggests waiting for formal diplomatic contact before engaging in substantive discussions." "Screw protocol," Elena said, surprising herself with her vehemence. "If they're coming here asking for help, they can deal with a little informal communication." The Codex seemed to consider this for a moment. Approach consistent with historical human diplomatic methodology, initiating communication link. The holographic displays shifted to show what appeared to be a video conference setup. Though instead of the usual human faces, Elena found herself looking at what could only be described as a cosmic customer service representative. The being on screen had multiple eyes, skin that shifted between colors like an oil slick, and an expression that somehow managed to convey both desperation and bureaucratic exhaustion. "Greetings, human representatives," the alien said in a voice that sounded like it had been processed through a universal translator having an existential crisis. "I am Chief Diplomatic Coordinator Vorth 7742. I must express both gratitude for your response and regret that circumstances require such urgent consultation." "Hello, Vorth," Elena said, deciding that if she was going to be humanity's first galactic diplomat, she might as well start with basic courtesy. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez. This is my colleague, Dr. Alex Petrov. We understand you're dealing with some kind of crisis?" The alien's multiple eyes widened in what Elena hoped was surprise rather than horror. "Direct communication without preliminary diplomatic protocols? Remarkable. Human efficiency appears to remain consistent across temporal intervals." We try, Elena said. Now, what's this about the situation deteriorating? Vorth's color-shifting skin darkened to something approaching cosmic despair. The Devourers have accelerated their expansion campaign. 17 core systems have fallen in the past solar cycle. Confederation military response has been inadequate. How inadequate? Alex asked. Our most recent strategic initiative involved sending the Devourers a formal request to cease hostilities, pending diplomatic negotiations. Elena blinked. How did that work out? The Devourers consumed the diplomatic courier ship, then broadcast the consumption process to all Confederation worlds as what we believe was a response to our diplomatic overture. Right, Elena said slowly. So negotiation is off the table. Unless humans have developed novel approaches to communicating with entities that view all other life forms as potential food sources. Elena looked at Alex, who shrugged. I mean, we do have pest control, he said. Pest control? Vorth asked, and his translator seemed to struggle with the concept. You know, Alex explained, when something starts eating everything you don't want it to eat, you figure out how to stop it from doing that. There was a long pause while Vorth apparently processed this concept. You have experience with controlling hostile life forms? Buddy, Elena said, we've been doing it for our entire species' existence. We've dealt with everything from locusts to invasive species to computer viruses. If something's causing problems, we figure out how to make it stop. Vorth's skin shifted to what Elena was beginning to interpret as excitement mixed with hope. This is consistent with historical human problem-solving methodologies. Confederation leadership is prepared to offer immediate restoration of founder status in exchange for assistance with current crisis. What exactly does that involve? Elena asked. Full administrative authority over Confederation resources, military command structure, and emergency powers to implement necessary reforms without traditional bureaucratic review processes. Elena felt a chill of either excitement or terror, possibly both. You're offering us complete control of galactic civilization? Desperate times require desperate measures, Vorth admitted. Current leadership acknowledges that traditional approaches have proven insufficient. Human unconventional methods represent our optimal probability for survival. And after we deal with this devourer problem, Confederation governance will be subject to founder discretion. Human leadership may continue or delegate authority as deemed appropriate. Elena looked around at the holographic displays showing the scope of galactic civilization. Millions of star systems, billions of sentient beings, technologies beyond human imagination, and all of it being offered to a species that had been playing in the cosmic minor leagues for the past 900,000 years. Alex, she said quietly, I think we're about to become cosmically important. Great, Alex replied, his voice only slightly strangled. I always wanted to be responsible for the fate of the galaxy. Really. It was right there on my career goals list, right between publish more papers and figure out how to work the new coffee machine in the break room. Elena turned back to Vorth. We're going to need some time to consult with our planetary leadership, but I think it's safe to say that humanity is interested in helping resolve this crisis. Consultation period acknowledged, Vorth replied. However, time sensitivity requires decision within 24 standard hours. Devourer advance continues during delays. Understood, Elena said. We'll be ready. The communication link closed, leaving Elena and Alex alone with the Codex and the weight of a decision that would determine the future of galactic civilization. So, Alex said after a long moment. No pressure or anything. Elena laughed, and it occurred to her that in the span of less than a week, she'd gone from studying dead alien civilizations to potentially running a live one. You know what the funny thing is? That we're having this conversation at all? That this actually feels right somehow. Like this is what humans are supposed to be doing. Alex considered this. Leading the group was Vorth, looking even more harried in person than he had over the communication link. Behind him came a collection of beings that looked like they'd been designed by a committee of cosmic bureaucrats who couldn't agree on what constituted proper anatomy. There were creatures with tentacles, beings that appeared to be made of crystalline energy, something that looked suspiciously like a walking filing cabinet, and at least 3 species that Elena couldn't even begin to categorize. "Greetings, Founder representatives," Vorth said, his translator making him sound like he was announcing the arrival of a delayed flight at an interdimensional airport. "I bring credentials from the Confederation Emergency Council and authorization to implement immediate Founder Protocol activation." "Welcome to Earth," Elena replied. "I'm Elena Vasquez, representing humanity in this matter. Before we get started, I have to ask, is the situation really as bad as you made it sound?" One of the crystalline beings stepped forward, its form shifting through what Elena hoped were expressions rather than signs of imminent breakdown. "Devourer forces consumed the Altarian Prime System 12 hours ago. 17 billion sentient beings." Confederation military response consisted of filing formal protest with Intergalactic Court of Justice. "Which is currently located where?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Altarian Prime System," Vorth admitted, "along with the entire intergalactic legal database." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process the sheer scope of bureaucratic dysfunction they were dealing with. "So the legal system, the military response, and 17 billion people are all gone, and your current plan is human intervention," Vorth said simply. "Founder Protocol grants complete authority over all Confederation resources for duration of current crisis." "Define current crisis," Alex said. "Existential threat to galactic civilization," the walking filing cabinet replied in a voice that sounded like someone reading tax code. "Estimated time to complete Confederation collapse, 43 standard days." Elena felt the familiar sensation of being handed a problem that was simultaneously impossible and urgent. It was like being asked to perform surgery while the patient was actively on fire. Except the patient was an entire galactic civilization, and the fire was made of entities that treated spaceships like appetizers. "Right," she said, surprising herself with how calm she sounded. 43 days to save the galaxy from something called the Devourers. "Alex, remind me to update my resume when this is over." "Assuming there's still a civilization left to have resumes," Alex muttered. "Human confidence in face of overwhelming odds consistent with historical patterns," observed one of the tentacled beings. "Psychological profile suggests species genuinely believe success is possible." "It's not that we think success is possible," Elena explained. "It's that we don't really see impossible as a valid excuse for not trying. So, let's start with the basics. What exactly are these Devourers, and what makes them so difficult to fight?" The alien delegation exchanged what Elena interpreted as meaningful glances, though with some of their anatomies, it was hard to tell what constituted a glance. "Devourers appear to be artificially enhanced biological entities," Vorth explained. "They consume organic and inorganic matter indiscriminately, converting it to additional Devourer units. They demonstrate advanced tactical intelligence and apparent immunity to conventional weapons." "Okay, so they're basically cosmic zombies that eat everything and can't be killed with normal weapons," Elena summarized. "What have you tried so far? Diplomatic contact, economic sanctions, formal complaints to galactic regulatory authorities, and strongly worded condemnations from the Confederation Ethics Committee." Elena stared at them. "You tried to negotiate with entities that eat everything they encounter?" "Established protocol requires exhaustion of all diplomatic options before military engagement," the filing cabinet explained defensively. "And the military engagement?" "Consisted primarily of filing requests for additional paperwork to authorize use of force." Elena looked at Alex, who had gone slightly green around the edges. "They've been fighting a bureaucratic war against an enemy that eats bureaucrats," she said. "It has not been effective," Vorth admitted. "I can imagine," Elena said dryly. "All right. What resources do we have available?" What followed was a briefing that would have been impressive if it hadn't been so depressing. The Confederation possessed technology that made human science look like cave paintings, military forces that numbered in the billions, and industrial capacity that could reshape entire star systems. They also possessed a command structure so Byzantine that it made the Pentagon look like a model of streamlined efficiency. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Elena said after an hour of increasingly surreal explanations. You have weapons that can crack planets, but you need approval from 17 different committees to use them. You have faster-than-light communication, but all messages have to be processed through a bureaucratic system that takes an average of 6 months to deliver urgent communications. And your military commanders need written authorization from the Department of Ethical Warfare Management before they can return fire when attacked. Accurate summary, Vorth confirmed. System was designed to prevent unauthorized aggressive actions. It's also designed to prevent authorized defensive actions, Alex pointed out. Unintended consequence, the crystalline being admitted. Elena rubbed her temples, feeling the mother of all headaches coming on. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Alex, I need you to get on the line with Earth and tell them we need our best military strategists, logistics experts, and anyone who's ever successfully organized anything more complicated than a birthday party. We're going to need all the help we can get. And what are you going to do? Alex asked. I'm going to start exercising some of that founder authority and see if we can turn this confederation into something that can actually fight back instead of filing complaints. Elena turned to the alien delegation. First order of business. I'm suspending all bureaucratic approval processes for the duration of this crisis. Military commanders now have authorization to engage hostile forces without waiting for paperwork. Communication priorities are being restructured so that urgent messages actually get delivered urgently. And I'm creating a new position, Director of Getting Things Done, which will have authority to bypass any regulation that's preventing effective crisis response. The aliens looked like they'd just been told that gravity was being temporarily suspended. Such extensive reforms would require approval from... The filing cabinet began. From the founder authority that you just granted me, Elena interrupted. Which means they're approved, effective immediately. But the constitutional review process is hereby expedited to emergency status. Alex, can you draft something that says we're implementing emergency protocols to deal with an existential threat to galactic civilization? I can write the galaxy is ending, so we're suspending the red tape in very official language, Alex confirmed. Perfect. That's our constitutional justification. Elena turned back to the aliens. Look, I understand this is a lot of change very quickly, but your current system has managed to lose 17 star systems to an enemy that you're still trying to serve with legal papers. We need to try something different. Human administrative approach appears to prioritize effectiveness over procedural compliance, one of the tentacled beings observed. That's kind of our thing, Elena agreed. Now, let's talk about these devourers. I need to know everything you know about them. Biology, technology, behavioral patterns, weaknesses, anything that might help us figure out how to stop them. What emerged from the subsequent briefing was both fascinating and terrifying. The devourers appeared to be the result of some kind of bioengineering project gone horribly wrong. They consumed matter at the molecular level, breaking it down and using it to replicate themselves. They were highly intelligent, capable of sophisticated tactical planning, and seemed to have some kind of collective consciousness that allowed them to coordinate across vast distances. They were also, according to all available data, completely unstoppable. Every weapon we've used against them has eventually been ineffective, Vorth explained. They appear to adapt to our tactics within a few engagements. What about biological weapons? Elena asked. Inappropriate for use against artificial biological entities, the filing cabinet replied. Also requires approval from Confederation Biological Warfare Ethics Board. Which was located where? Altarian Prime System. Right. Consumed along with everything else. Elena thought for a moment. What about unconventional approaches? Has anyone tried anything that wasn't in the standard military playbook? The aliens exchanged more of those meaningful glances. Confederation military doctrine prohibits unauthorized tactical innovations. Of course it does, Elena sighed. Alex, add authorized tactical innovation to our list of emergency reforms. Got it. Should I also add common sense as a guiding principle? Definitely. Over the next few hours, Elena found herself essentially rebuilding Galactic Military Command structure from scratch. It was like being asked to renovate a house while it was actively on fire, except the house was the size of a galaxy, and the fire was made of things that wanted to eat the renovation crew. The good news was that once she started cutting through the bureaucratic nonsense, the Confederation actually had impressive resources at their disposal. The bad news was that those resources had been tied up in so much red tape that they might as well have been decorative. Human organizational efficiency exceeding projections, Vorth reported after Elena had managed to reduce military response time from 6 months to 6 hours. Confederation forces report significant improvement in operational readiness. Great, Elena said, reviewing tactical reports that were actually current instead of being 6 months out of date. Now we need to figure out how to use those forces against an enemy that adapts to everything we throw at it. This, it turned out, was where human thinking really started to diverge from standard galactic approaches. The Confederation had been treating the Devourers like a traditional military threat, something to be engaged with superior firepower and conventional tactics. Every time the Devourers adapted to their methods, they'd tried harder versions of the same methods. Humans, on the other hand, had a long history of dealing with adaptive threats. From bacteria developing antibiotic resistance to computer viruses evolving to avoid detection, humanity had learned that the key to fighting adaptive enemies wasn't to use the same approach harder. It was to keep changing the approach faster than the enemy could adapt. We need to stop thinking like generals and start thinking like pest control specialists, Elena explained to the assembled military commanders during their first strategy meeting. You don't beat an adaptive enemy by hitting it harder. You beat it by being more adaptive than it is. Clarification requested, said Fleet Admiral Zorx 9981, a being that looked like someone had crossed an octopus with a particularly militant filing system. Current tactical database contains no references to pest control methodologies. That's because you've been thinking about this wrong, Alex said, having arrived with a team of human military advisors who looked like they were trying very hard not to stare at their alien colleagues. You've been treating the Devourers like an army. But they're not an army. They're an infestation. The distinction being? An army has goals, strategies, political objectives, explained General Catherine Walsh, who had somehow managed to become Earth's first interstellar military advisor without even updating her security clearance. An infestation just spreads until something stops it from spreading. Different problem, different solutions. Elena nodded. The Devourers don't want to conquer the galaxy. They want to consume it. They're not interested in negotiation, territory, or politics. They're essentially a galactic-scale biological process that happens to be intelligent enough to avoid obstacles. So how do we stop a biological process? Asked Colonel James Hendricks, who was taking notes on a tablet while simultaneously trying to figure out how the alien holographic displays worked. Same way we've always stopped biological processes that threaten us, Elena said. We disrupt their life cycle, target their reproduction mechanisms, cut off their resource supply, or introduce environmental changes that they can't adapt to fast enough. The alien military commanders looked like they were witnessing the invention of fire, except fire was being invented by creatures they'd previously considered barely civilized. Human approach suggests treating Devourers as ecological problem rather than military problem, Admiral Zorx observed. Methodology unprecedented in Confederation military doctrine. Which is probably why it might work, Elena said. Look, you've been fighting these things for months using standard military tactics. How's that working out for you? 17 star systems consumed, military effectiveness declining with each engagement, Admiral Zorx admitted. Right, so maybe it's time to try something different. What followed was the most unusual war planning session in galactic history. Human military advisors worked alongside alien strategists to develop what they diplomatically termed non-traditional tactical approaches, and what Elena privately thought of as, let's try every crazy idea we can think of and see what works. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Dr. Rachel Martinez, an epidemiologist who had been brought in to analyze devourer reproduction patterns. They're not reproducing randomly, she announced during a briefing that was being attended by representatives of 17 different species, most of whom had never seen a human before. There's a pattern to their expansion. They're following resource distribution networks. Clarification requested, said Vorth. They're spreading along the paths that give them the most efficient access to consumable matter, Dr. Martinez explained. Star systems, trade routes, communication networks. They're not just eating everything. They're optimizing their consumption patterns. Elena felt a spark of excitement, which means they're predictable. More than that, Dr. Martinez continued. It means they're dependent on those resource networks. Cut off their access to high-efficiency consumption paths, and you force them into less optimal expansion patterns. Tactical implications? Admiral Zorx asked. General Walsh smiled, and Elena recognized the expression of someone who had just figured out how to win a war that everyone else thought was unwinnable. We don't fight them where they are, Walsh said. We fight them where they're going to be. And more importantly, we make sure they can't get there efficiently. The strategy that emerged was unlike anything in Confederation military history. Instead of trying to destroy Devourer forces directly, they would focus on disrupting the resource networks that the Devourers were using to expand. Cut off their access to easy targets, force them to waste energy on inefficient consumption patterns, and then hit them when they were spread thin and struggling to maintain their expansion rate. It was, Elena realized, essentially the same strategy that humanity had used to deal with everything from invasive species to computer viruses. Don't try to kill the problem directly, just make it too expensive for the problem to maintain itself. Strategy assessment, unprecedented but theoretically sound, the Codex announced when Elena ran the plan past it. Probability of success, significantly higher than current Confederation approaches. How significantly higher? Current approaches, 0.3% success probability. Proposed human strategy, 67.4% success probability. Elena felt a mix of relief and terror. Those are much better odds, but they're still not great. Improvement from certain failure to probable success represents optimal available outcome given current circumstances, the Codex pointed out. Fair enough, Elena said. Let's do this. The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity that spanned half the galaxy. Confederation forces, operating under human strategic guidance and freed from bureaucratic constraints for the first time in millennia, began implementing what became known as the Resource Denial Campaign. Trade routes were systematically shut down ahead of devourer advances, forcing the entities to waste energy searching for alternative consumption sources. Communication networks were rerouted through secured pathways, preventing the devourers from using infrastructure to coordinate their expansion. Most importantly, potential targets were evacuated or fortified in patterns that forced the devourers to choose between high energy consumption of defended positions or low energy consumption of scattered resources. It worked. Not perfectly, and not without losses. But for the first time since the devourer crisis had begun, Confederation forces were achieving tactical victories. Cut off their access to high-efficiency consumption paths, and you force them into less optimal expansion patterns. Tactical implications, Admiral Zorks asked. General Walsh smiled, and Elena recognized the expression of someone who had just figured out how to win a war that everyone else thought was unwinnable. We don't fight them where they are, Walsh said. We fight them where they're going to be. And more importantly, we make sure they can't get there efficiently. The strategy that emerged was unlike anything in Confederation military history. Instead of trying to destroy devourer forces directly, they would focus on disrupting the resource networks that the devourers were using to expand. Cut off their access to easy targets, force them to waste energy on inefficient consumption patterns, and then hit them when they were spread thin and struggling to maintain their expansion rate. It was, Elena realized, essentially the same strategy that humanity had used to deal with everything from invasive species to computer viruses. Don't try to kill the problem directly. Just make it too expensive for the problem to maintain itself. Strategy assessment, unprecedented but theoretically sound, the Codex announced when Elena ran the plan past it. Probability of success, significantly higher than current Confederation approaches. How significantly higher? Current approaches, 0.3% success probability. Proposed human strategy, 67.4% success probability. Elena felt a mix of relief and terror. Those are much better odds, but they're still not great. Improvement from certain failure to probable success represents optimal available outcome given current circumstances, the Codex pointed out. Fair enough, Elena said. Let's do this. The next 3 weeks were a blur of activity that spanned half the galaxy. Confederation forces, operating under human strategic guidance and freed from bureaucratic constraints for the first time in millennia, began implementing what became known as the Resource Denial Campaign. Trade routes were systematically shut down ahead of devourer advances, forcing the entities to waste energy searching for alternative consumption sources. Communication networks were rerouted through secured pathways, preventing the devourers from using infrastructure to coordinate their expansion. Most importantly, potential targets were evacuated or fortified in patterns that forced the devourers to choose between high-energy consumption of defended positions or low-energy consumption of scattered resources. It worked. Not perfectly, and not without losses. But for the first time since the devourer crisis had begun, Confederation forces were achieving tactical victories. The entities that had seemed unstoppable were suddenly struggling to maintain their expansion rate, forced into increasingly inefficient consumption patterns that left them vulnerable to conventional weapons. Devourer adaptation rate declining, Admiral Zorks reported during a strategy meeting that would have been impossible under the old bureaucratic system. Entities appear to be experiencing resource stress. Good, Elena said, studying tactical displays that showed devourer forces scattered across a dozen different star systems, trying to maintain expansion while dealing with constantly shifting resource availability. How long can we keep this up? Current resource denial operation sustainable for approximately 4 standard months, General Walsh replied. After that, we'll need to transition to direct engagement while they're still weakened. Elena nodded. 4 months to prepare for the kind of battle that would determine the fate of galactic civilization. No pressure or anything. But here's the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy was rediscovering. They were really good at preparing for impossible battles. Give them a deadline and an enemy that everyone said couldn't be beaten, and they'd find a way to surprise everyone, including themselves. The final engagement took place in the Centauri Tertiary system, where Devourer forces had been forced to concentrate after months of resource denial operations. It was the largest space battle in galactic history, involving thousands of ships, millions of personnel, and enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. Elena watched it unfold from the command center that had been hastily established on the Confederation flagship, Excessive Paperwork, a name that she'd tried unsuccessfully to have changed to something less depressing. Devourer forces engaging on multiple fronts, Admiral Zorks reported. Entities demonstrating expected adaptation patterns to conventional weaponry. Right on schedule, Elena said. The Devourers were doing exactly what human strategists had predicted they would do, adapting to the weapons being used against them, developing countermeasures, becoming more effective at defending themselves against standard Confederation military technology, which was when the second phase of the human strategy kicked in. General Walsh, Elena said, implement Protocol Chaos. With pleasure, Walsh replied, and Elena could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Protocol Chaos was, in essence, the military application of everything that had made humans unpredictable to their galactic neighbors 900,000 years ago. Instead of continuing with conventional weapons that the Devourers were adapting to, Confederation forces suddenly switched to tactics that were so unorthodox that even humans weren't entirely sure they would work. Ships began using their drive systems as kinetic weapons, ramming Devourer entities at near-light speeds. Communication arrays were converted into high-powered broadcast systems that flooded Devourer coordination networks with everything from alien music to recitations of Confederation tax code. Mining equipment was weaponized into planet-cracking devices that targeted the resource bases the Devourers were trying to establish. Most importantly, human advisors had spent the past 4 months teaching Confederation forces the art of tactical improvisation, the ability to adapt their strategies faster than their enemies could adapt to their strategies. Devourer adaptation rate insufficient to counter current tactical innovations, Admiral Zorks reported, and Elena could swear she heard excitement in the alien's voice. Entities appear to be experiencing systematic failure of defensive countermeasures, because they're trying to adapt to tactics that were changing faster than they can process, Elena said. They're designed to handle conventional threats, not enemies that are making it up as they go along. The battle lasted 18 hours, and when it was over, the Devourer threat had been effectively neutralized. Not destroyed completely. Some entities had escaped to deep space, but broken as a coordinated force and reduced to scattered remnants that pose no significant threat to galactic civilization. Elena stood in the command center, surrounded by aliens who were looking at human military advisors with something approaching awe, and realized that humanity had just earned its place in galactic society by being exactly as unpredictable and chaotic as everyone had feared. Crisis resolution achieved, the Codex announced. Confederation survival probability now exceeds 99.7%. And the founder status? Elena asked. Remains active pending human decision regarding continued galactic governance. Elena looked around at the command center, at the holographic displays showing star systems that were safe because humans had figured out how to fight an unbeatable enemy, at alien military officers who were eagerly discussing the finer points of tactical improvisation with human advisors. Alex, she said, I think we're going to be busy for a while. Running the galaxy? Fixing the galaxy, Elena corrected. There's a lot of work to be done, and apparently we're the ones crazy enough to do it. The next few months were, in many ways, more challenging than the war itself. Having saved galactic civilization, humanity now had to figure out how to run it. This involved everything from restructuring Confederation government to establishing new trade agreements to dealing with the 17 different species that wanted to thank humanity by gifting them various planets, moons, and star systems. Elena found herself appointed as the first human galactic administrator, a position that came with authority over an interstellar civilization, and a headache that was literally astronomical in scope. Alex became her deputy administrator, a role he accepted with the enthusiasm of someone who had resigned himself to a lifetime of cosmic bureaucracy. But here's what they discovered. Running a galactic civilization was actually not that different from running any other large organization. except that some of your employees had tentacles and the quarterly reports covered multiple star systems. The key insight was the same one that had allowed humanity to defeat the Devourers. Most problems that seemed impossibly complex were actually just familiar problems at a bigger scale. Supply chain management worked the same way whether you were shipping goods across continents or across star systems. Personnel management required the same basic skills whether you were dealing with human employees or crystalline energy beings who communicated through color changes. Human administrative efficiency continues to exceed projections. The Codex reported 6 months after Elena had officially accepted the position of Galactic Administrator. Citizen satisfaction ratings approaching founder-era levels. "How are we doing that?" Elena asked, reviewing reports that showed improving conditions across hundreds of star systems. "Primarily through application of common sense to previously intractable problems," the Codex replied. "Example: reduction of interstellar shipping delays from average of 200 days to 12 days, through elimination of redundant inspection procedures." "We just cut out the stupid parts of the system?" "Essentially, yes. Human approach appears to prioritize functional efficiency over procedural complexity." Elena laughed. "We've been fixing the galaxy by applying basic logic to things that nobody bothered to think about logically." "Accurate assessment," the Codex confirmed. "Also consistent with historical human problem-solving patterns." The more Elena learned about her role, the more she realized that humanity's reputation as cosmic troublemakers had been somewhat misunderstood. They weren't troublemakers because they wanted to cause problems. They were troublemakers because they instinctively looked at broken systems and tried to fix them, regardless of whether the people running those systems wanted them fixed or not. It was, she realized, exactly the kind of attitude that a galactic civilization needed if it wanted to keep working instead of collapsing under the weight of its own bureaucracy. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said to Alex one day as they were reviewing a proposal to establish universal healthcare for all Confederation species, a proposal that was actually moving through the approval process instead of getting buried in committees. "That we accidentally conquered the galaxy by trying to save it?" "That we didn't conquer anything," Elena replied. "We just started treating galactic civilization like it was something that was supposed to work, and everybody else was so surprised by that approach that they decided to let us run things." Alex considered this. "So we're in charge of the galaxy because we're the only species that thinks the galaxy should function properly?" "Pretty much, yeah." "That's either really inspiring or really depressing." Elena looked out at the stars visible through the administrative center's viewing ports, thinking about the millions of worlds and billions of beings that were depending on human leadership to keep their civilization functioning. "I'm going with inspiring," she said. "We've got a lot of work to do. But for the first time in 900,000 years, the galaxy has administrators who actually want to make things better, instead of just maintaining the status quo." "Even if we have no idea what we're doing most of the time?" "Especially because we have no idea what we're doing most of the time," Elena said with a grin. "That means we're not limited by assumptions about what's possible or impossible. We just look at problems and figure out how to solve them. And that, ultimately, was how humanity ended up running the galaxy. Not through conquest or superior technology or ancient birthrights, but by being the one species that looked at a broken system and thought, we can probably fix this. It wasn't the most conventional path to galactic leadership, but then again, humans had never been particularly conventional. They were the species that had looked at the impossibility of flight and built airplanes, stared at the vastness of space and built spaceships, faced the complexity of galactic civilization and said, "Sure, we'll give it a try." Elena Vasquez, xenoarchaeologist turned galactic administrator, stood in her office overlooking the administrative heart of interstellar civilization and smiled. She had no idea what challenges tomorrow would bring, but she was confident that humanity would find some way to muddle through them. After all, they were good at that sort of thing. Epilogue, from A Brief History of Galactic Governance, 47th edition, published by the Confederation Educational Authority, 2421 CE. The period following the human assumption of galactic leadership, commonly referred to as the Common Sense Era, was characterized by rapid improvements in governmental efficiency, citizen satisfaction, and overall stability of interstellar civilization. Human administrators, working in collaboration with representatives from all Confederation species, implemented reforms that addressed systemic issues that had persisted for millennia. Perhaps most remarkably, These reforms were achieved not through revolutionary upheaval, but through the systematic application of what humans termed basic logic to complex administrative problems. The success of this approach led to widespread adoption of human problem-solving methodologies throughout Confederation governance, as noted by Galactic Administrator Elena Vasquez in her landmark address to the Confederation Assembly. "We didn't save the galaxy by being smarter than everyone else. We saved it by being too stupid to realize that some problems were supposed to be unsolvable." This statement, while typically informal by human standards, encapsulates the philosophical approach that transformed galactic civilization and established humanity as the species best suited for large-scale administrative responsibility. The fact that humans continue to express surprise at their own effectiveness in this role is considered by xenopsychologists to be integral to their success. And somewhere in the archives of the ancient alien codex, a crystalline artifact continued its patient monitoring of galactic affairs, occasionally noting with what might charitably be called satisfaction that some things, thankfully, never change. Humans were still the galaxy's most effective problem solvers, even when, especially when, they had no idea what they were doing.